What's up, Air Junkies? Another dish of that cracker sauce coming at you. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, at our last club meeting, we had 3 of us discussing the ways we stay up in that light lift. Those, most of the days in Santa Barbara are light. Some of my favorite fun days. Try and make a chocolate milkshake out of a couple of lemons. You know what I'm talking about. That's right. So first I just do my spiel, and then John Lyon. John Lyon. Come on now. John Greynald, Little John, has been spinning more circles in Santa Barbara than probably anybody around. Been doing since the early 80s, a couple of days a week. Very fascinating to hear his hang gliding point of view. Mitch Riley was after him, talking about the low. He goes low all the time, further than anybody, long lines consistently. So he gives his 2 cents on it. Very interesting. And then a little thermal etiquette after that. So I think it's a beautiful thing to hear everybody's opinion. I think Will Glad puts it perfectly. He states in a Thermoline article about what really matters is your own theory. Question it and refine it continuously for best results. So with all that being said, let's get right to it, man. Let's get to this meeting. Let's hear what these people got to say. And then make up your own mind. Figure out what you got to do to keep yourself safe and keep yourself in the air as long as possible. All right, brothers and sisters, we love you. Here we go. We can do our research, we can practice. It's kind of hard to often verbalize what we're doing out there. So the bottom line is you got to do it for yourself. You got to research it yourself. You got to figure out what works for you, for your glider, for your style, for everything about flying. A lot of it takes just analyzing after every thermal. If you miss one, you fall out of one, you figure out what you did wrong, what you got to do better. It just takes a lot of doing that. But it doesn't help getting input from everybody else. If we have 20 people talking about them, I'll listen to every one of them because I think there's something valuable in everybody's different experience out there. Turn and circle. So the one thing I got to say about this too, Santa Barbara, I think most of our days are pretty scratchy days. You read all the other literature, people talking about when they're stuck in inversions or they can't get up, and they're talking about they can't get like 2,000 or 3,000 feet above launch. It's like our best day ever. So it's a little different ballgame here. We're kind of blessed with this east-west mountain range that works well at the low sun angle in the winter. So it often is very forgiving in that manner that the thermals aren't real powerful. It's not like midsummer days where the sun's super high and cooking things. So we can play around with the convection and the heating that the bushes store and surf those to often easily get an hour or 2 flight almost every day of the year. I think it's possible. So I think it's a lot of fun. It's a great challenge, but you definitely need to give respect to it. So if you're not feeling it that day, your mojo's a little off, your glider starts dancing or talking to you, it's time to definitely use more terrain clearance right off the bat. Don't even think about it. Or sometimes it's different at different altitudes. So you give up on it at one altitude, then maybe you get lower, then maybe it's okay to play with it a little more. But definitely need respect. So a long time ago, quick story, side story. I was on my hang glider, hucked off of Luminaires, a more windy day than usual. People were up everywhere. And I didn't give enough respect to the day or that it was different or to think about it. Just thought I'd do my thing, huck off, start doing circles, get up. My wife was like at 5,500 feet at Thermal Factory having time of her life. And I need to catch up to all my friends, huck off, a couple circles, a little windier. And before I know it, boom. Head first, downwind, into the side of the hill, below Skyport, down in there somewhere. Totally didn't give enough respect to the day. Just bottom line, I screwed up for a lot of people. A lot of people spent hours digging me out. My face was bloody, but other than that, it was all right. My wife was tripping out. She's like, "Is that Aaron down there?" And the radio, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." But try to calm her down. She's having a good old time. So I did on purpose. So you got to definitely respect give the day respect if you're feeling something different, or even just think about the conditions a little differently. It was windy that day. It's not always windy up there, and I just went and I didn't respect it, and I got caught for it. So anyways, it happens. But most of the days, we get away with scratching and squeezing a lot of extra airtime out of this. So that's all my deal in respect. Attitude. I think attitude has a big deal to do with it. Attitude, anytime you put a landing fear or thought in your head, it's just like anything else. It's going to happen, you're going to do it. So I try not to think about landing at all. I try to keep my attitude the same when I'm high or low. So I I'm just out there enjoying the day. Just because I'm scratching at the knob at St. Mary's, right above St. Mary's, 10 minutes after I launch, I'm not worried about it. It's okay. I'm just going to figure this out. I'm going to have fun, enjoy the day. I'm going to concentrate and try to do everything I can to get out of here. I think that's very important. I don't get panicky about landing. I'm not going to worry about landing until my feet are almost on the ground. Plenty of time then. I was like, all right, I'll figure it out. Because there's always opportunities to get up somewhere, I think. And if you think about landing and put that word in your head, then you're going to be on the ground very quick. So trying to think about the actual, landing. I mean, you got to have your know when to go to make it to certain places. But than that, you forget about it. You just concentrate on thermaling. I try to laugh about it more than I curse about it, but I do curse about it once in a while. But I work a long time to gain 50 feet, and then I lose it. Usually because I screwed something up. But boredom? No boredom. I'm just enjoying it. So anyways, I'm out enjoying the day. I try to think about the same, whether I'm low or high. When I'm low, sometimes I get even more into it and zen into it. I'm more excited because I think, I'm going to get this. And, I lose track of time, which is pretty awesome. You just forget all about it. And you're just working down there scratching. So I think attitude's a big deal in this game for sure. The what?
You really haven't fun and you're not.
There you go. Everybody know Crazy Dave? Been flying since 1972 right here in Santa Barbara. Woo! He's the first guy to jump off our mountains right there. Yeah, baby.
Sonic on.
It's gonna be famous someday. Ow! Anyways, playing the odds. Let's touch on this real quick. There's an awesome video on the Information Superhighway about this. It's up to about 16 views, so go ahead and check it out. Playing the odds. You want to be deliberate about where you go, especially on these light days or when you're in a situation where you have to get up or else landing is going to be imminent. So I see a lot of people fishing all the wrong places, giving away altitude. I think you need to be deliberate about the most high odd spots in that zone to sit there and be patient until these thermals come through. These thermals come through in cycles often. So if this is a spine, and more than likely this is going to be your highest odd of some kind of lift going on. But if you fly right past it because it wasn't booming, and you go fish over here, you lose another 20 feet. Come by, nope, lose another 30 feet. Nope, another 40 feet. But if you come on here and just sit here, you're going to have a much better chance to be deliberate about your approach, and your technique, and where you're going to be to find that lift. You're going to have much better odds of getting up. So it's just simply playing the odds and sticking to the most high probability triggers. I've flown Willie a lot over the years. This guy flies, I don't know how he does it. He goes wherever the hell he wants and he gets up. So, there are some oddities to it. And people do it all different ways. And sometimes, I'll be doing my high odd thing and some rookie is swinging all around wildly and staying higher than me all day. It happens. That's the way it goes. But if you want to be consistent at this game and staying up at the low stuff, you got to be deliberate about staying on the most high odd points. So, and I think that has a lot to do with it in this game here in Santa Barbara.
You scratch yourself, the problem is other people have to get you right away.
There you go. See what I'm saying? All right. So on to the efficiency and the technique. So being very efficient with your glider. It's very important to have your technique dialed as far as being efficient. Very light touch, very hands up. On a road trip, Hammer not here. Where's Hammer at? I tell us all the time. Hammer went on a hang gliding road trip a long time ago. And I noticed this guy barely touches the steering wheel when he drives, And he's a master of milking the light lift too. And everything he does is just a light touch, You drive down the road and look at people's windows, 90% of them can't even see their fingers, they're just gripped on the wheel. Just this light touch thing, right? Hang glider, paraglider, it's all very light touch. You want to know what your glider's telling you to help find where that lift is going to be. Ken Block has awesome Jim Connie videos of him driving, best driver, race car driver in the world. And you see him sliding around doing everything. You rarely see his fingers wrapped up under his gloves. I mean, this is intense, active, wild driving. He's just light touch, flipping the wheel around, stick, everything. It's amazing to watch. And I think we need to do the same thing on our gliders. It's very light touch. We're knowing what our glider's telling us. We're feeling it through our hips, through our hands. And then the hang glider, in your back and your arms, which way it's pitching, yaw, and turning. Very important. What else about that? Let me get there.
I got a story to go with that. I got to throw it in.
Yes.
Hammer and I flew together today, and he stood on launch. He waited for his cycle. He took off in it. He got up. He went, cruised around the double R, and screwed around for an hour and everything, and went out to the beach and landed. I took off, I'm not gonna wait for a cycle, I know it's good, he's getting up. Bolted out to the tit. I just made a couple of bad turns, 30 below, 50 below in front of the tit. Oh, now I'm scratching over the Calvary, didn't get it. Came into Parma 11 minutes later and landed. Watched him fly by, actually radio customer.
Oh, yeah, that light touch.
And he waited for the cycle on launch. That made all the difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Patience.
And it was all about taking off in a cycle and then stay, keeping the high ground.
Yes.
So yeah.
I love watching Chad at the hill. I think he's like the ultimate efficient machine. You can watch his glider, his trailing edge barely, turns. The outside edge rarely ever curls over, and he keeps these flat turns. He's probably 30, 40 pounds under the bottom weight of his range. He still, perfectly turns that thing flat. So you can't blame these things on the glider, right? It's technique and figuring out and knowing exactly how to do this. So it's pretty amazing to watch him fly over there. And using my Vario, I like to keep my Vario at the most sensitive setting because I want to know when I'm in zeros. Because if I'm in zeros, then obviously there's rising air around me because my sink rate's like 160 feet, 200 feet a minute. So if I'm in zeros, if I'm not sinking, not rising, I want to know that. I want to know where I am to be on that, to milk it, to possibly wait for more lift to come through right there. Also, flying with no Vario is a great practice. Bruce Goldsmith talks about in the books all the time. By the way, this book is amazing. I'm going to plug it real quick. Bruce Goldsmith's 50 Ways to Fly, and this thermal flying book. Amazing book, both of them. Tons of ideas in there. But they always preach about flying with no Vario. Timmy flies with no Vario at the hill all the time, and that guy can scratch and eke like nobody else. I think it's from all that no Vario flying there. I noticed when I don't fly the Vario for a bit, and then I go back to the mountains, or I go mountain flying, I'm often like starting to turn before my Vario even starts to beat. You just get more in tune to your glider. So just those extra couple seconds or second of being ahead of the game will really benefit you.
So you're saying you can set your Vario to give you beeps when you're hitting zero sinking?
Totally. Yeah, and it can be annoying on strong days. It's going to be screaming the whole time. But for the majority of our days, it's I think a great thing to do. Let's see. Like I said with the hands up thing, the trim speed and your sink speed I think are pretty similar on these modern gliders, are pretty much the same. In the old days I think you really had to dive deep in the brakes to slow your glider down to turn to get the most lift. But now when we're not in lift and you're eking on those brakes, I think the altitude you're losing from being in sync and on those brakes is way more of a harm than being fast and coming back in that thermal to milk it again. I think these modern gliders, you just want to maximize that L over D with the speed as much as possible because we can still turn them really tight. I think Mitch is going to talk more about that in a little bit too. Okay, and then the whole don't swing it around thing. You don't want to wildly swing around because we want to be efficient, right? Our best L over D is when our glider is flat. Same with a hang glider. So anytime you swing, you're cutting away from that greatly. So you want to keep that thing as flat as you can, cruising all around, especially when you're in fishing mode. When I'm in fishing mode and I'm on a spine, for one, I'm being deliberate. I'm staying right on that spine. For two, I'm barely, I'm trying the lee side, the windward side, but I'm not going wild over here. I'm keeping my glider super flat, almost just weight shift, just cruising around, looking and trying to feel where this extra lift is. All right, I'm going to talk about figure eights. All right, so we got our skyport launch right here, right? We got the paraglider launch, we got the hang glider launch, we got that house thermal that falls off right here, right? One important thing about respect for the day too. You like this? I made this a little bit good. Come on, turn it over too. There it is. So another thing about flying close to the terrain is you can cheat yourself some extra altitude by knowing where the steep side is and the windward side. So when I pounded in a long time ago, Hammer told me later, he's like, hey, you should, when it's windy out of the southwest coming this way, he's like, you should turn your circles out over the steeper part of the canyon. And that way when you're on your downwind, you're falling away from it. Because the downwind's where things happen the quickest, where you have the least amount of control as far as turn authority, so forth. So I was like, man, I wish you would have told me that a week ago. But anyways, so now I make a point of it. If I'm really close to the terrain, I use the steepest side of the terrain to get on my downwind wind part when I'm turning. That way I don't have to mess with, with coming in low and smacking here. I'd much rather smack into a hill coming upwind than downwind. So I have some, that's another good point to make. I also change how I fly in different parts of the range. In the rockier places, sometimes I give it more respect. In the bushier places, sometimes I'm touching the bushes, honestly, you know. That's not always a good thing, but it happens. So that's another good reason to keep all the speed you can in your glider. Because if you do get too close, you want to have a little authority for pitch control to peel you off of that. If you're deep in the brakes and you have nowhere to go and the bushes come up on you because of whatever, you're in them. That's it. So always keep that extra bit of glider for some pitch control and to get you out of a sticky situation. So we launch, we go over to the house thermal. We're feeling it. Maybe I drop a hip, a butt cheek one way. If I feel pressure on my left side, leaning my left side, going out, making sure I have plenty of clearance. I start making my turn real wide. Don't want to dive in. If you dive in right away real quick, your body swings to the outside, so it's kind of counterintuitive to start that first bit of coordination. So it's real important when you start your turn, you start with your hips, you lean, you kind of slow, and then you can accelerate into it if you want. But of course, turning 360 is going to be your most efficient way almost every time if you can, if the terrain allows it, and you have plenty of clearance to make it. So you're turning real close, real slow, and you're getting all the way around, and your downwind side is hopefully on the steeper side, so you have even more clearance to work your way up. If there's not enough room for a full 360, then we're stuck with figure eights. So figure eights are cool, but the problem with figure eights is you're in one pass, you're dipping your wing once, you're dipping your wing twice. So you lose altitude real quick that way. Once with a circle, you're only doing it once, then you start coordinating. And when you coordinate it, you're constantly readjusting it. You'll see the best pilots, I think the best pilots are always constantly readjusting it every single thermal, every time. And that's how they get the highest. If you watch like the flames in a fire, they're not just perfect straight up. They always kind of dance around. And I think the best pilots are figuring that out and dance around with the best lift. So back to the figure eights. So, I love flying the ridges, and I love surging around, swinging on the ridges. For one, it's like a big swing set in the sky. And for two, I think it's great practice to learn exactly where you catch your glider and how far away you can get away with it to resume flying without having to dive again. And the figure eighting technique is exactly that. It's just surge control. So when you launch and you do a figure eight, I could be on a coyote with another friend, same day, same lift, same everything. But if he's losing 10 feet more than me on each turn, that's it. That's in 2 complete passes. He's 40 feet lower in time to go. If I maintain that same exact spot just because I was 10 feet more efficient on each turn, then I'm still here waiting for waiting for a thermal again. So I think every 10 feet is very crucial, and every turn is very crucial. So you need to practice and figure out where you regain that speed. When the glider comes up to surge again, where to let it start flying. If you wait till it's too far behind you, then it's going to take some altitude to get flying again. And it's also very important to figure out exactly where to turn. So this happens like the Coombra a lot, Cathedral a lot, you get pinned up, or everybody gets pinned up against the wall. You don't want to give it up. And there's you keep doing these passes and there's just one little pop, one little pop. There's no way you can turn, you're too close to the terrain. But if you can figure out this figure eight thing just right, you can possibly get above it and get to the better air above. And so that surge control and those figure eights are hugely important. To let your glider dive once you start falling out of it, no outside brake to retain all that speed. And right when you come back to that lift, just the slightest amount of brakes, so you change that energy into a climb, and then you're doing it again. And so you can keep bumping up in these little bumps of thermals or lift that aren't big enough to turn it. It's kind of like skateboarding on a ramp or swinging on a swing set, or even on a bike through like a pump track where you never needed an extra pedal or to pump, on a half pipe on a skateboard you keep pumping and never push and you keep gaining speed. Same with on swings, you keep going. By just changing your weight shift and your inertia and maximizing, you're basically swapping the energy for your diving to into the lift, to a little bit of brakes, not too much brakes, we're close to the terrain, to change that into a climb, to immediately turn it again. So your figure eights, you get real tight until you can get up high enough to coordinate 360s around. So lots of different techniques, lots of practice. Be careful going downwind, obviously, with all these. And always give the terrain plenty of respect. I'm trying to think. There's a study done a while back about the Coriolis effect. So you know, are the thermals always spin the same way in certain hemispheres? And it was proven that they weren't. They don't. So, you know, obviously if you could turn upwind the whole time in a thermal, you'll probably climb faster than downwind. So I try not to think about that, but what I think about is when I'm at a spot, and each technique I'll do for at least 5-10 turns, a couple minutes. Because I'm trying to sit there deliberately waiting for a lift to come through. So I'll do one technique for a while until I change it. So if I'm sitting there for a while, going one direction, then maybe at my highest point, I'll change my direction. I don't want to give up that altitude to change my direction, but at my highest point, I'll change my direction. Just try another way. Maybe it bounces up the terrain a little better. Remember, we're flying the terrain most of the time. Or maybe just that direction is better suited for that thermal. So lots of different techniques, but I don't change them real quick. I put many minutes into each one at that same spot, trying to figure out, waiting, because I know they also come in cycles, so sometimes it's just a patience thing. I just got to figure out what to do, not to sink out before the next set of lift moves. What do then? And often staying glued to the highest points too. Often, you know, in many other places, the best lift is away from the hill. There's a study done in the Alps in one of these books about the convection coming up and the friction slowing down the lift against the hill. It actually, there's more lift and more upwind push further away from the hill. But in Santa Barbara, you know, it's usually light. We gotta stick with what we have first. So even though I think the point out front might be better, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna sit there a couple cycles before I go fish and try it. And if it's not there, I'm gonna come right back to that high ground and do what I was doing, whether it's figure eights or circles again. But each time, you know, obviously I'm trying to bench up to get higher, but I'm not giving up that high ground unless a huge sign is telling me otherwise. Whether I've already been there for 5 or 10 minutes and not gained anything, or I see somebody else, or I see bushes shaking, or I see trash floating. Well, we don't see trash here floating, but like butterflies or bugs or birds or something else that's cruising up by me that I could go out there and actually give it a go. So that's pretty much my scratching techniques. I think that sums most of it up. But being efficient, just keeping that glider flat, and staying deliberately committed to those high odd spots, I think are what work best in Santa Barbara, at least for me. So with that, I want to hear Mitch's spiel. And Lil John's here with the hang glider. We got the hang glider.
Right. So yeah, James asked me to provide some kind of hang gliding perspective, so I'll focus over here. The 6 hang gliding. No, there's more than 6 here.
But John's a scratch master. This guy's been doing it better than anybody forever. You'll still see him out there.
The term scratching was from about 40 years ago, and refers to being close to the terrain, kind of scratching the terrain. So I'd like to, kind of change it to light lift as a more appropriate term for, I think, what this discussion involves. And all I have to add is just a little segment about hang gliding, which is that you, when you're thermally, you need to be not only patient, but aggressive. And this has to do with the fact that you're getting pushed out fucking thermal all the time. And so you got to fight your way back into it. And so a lot of times people will give up too early. They won't be patient enough to kind of do some searching around. You might lose a few hundred feet in the process. So being patient's good, and then being aggressive's good. If you're just like, no, it beat me up and I'm leaving now, well, you're going to go to the LZ, and that's my 2 cents on the hang gliding. The other thing too is that we've got so many people in the air these days that you can use these other pilots for figuring out the day. And that's probably more telling than any amount of study you did that morning trying to figure out the weather patterns. Just take a look. Don't be the first to launch if there's a whole other bunch of people down here thinking it's a light day. Take a look at what the other people are doing. See where they are in relation to the hill and see where that drift is at. And, oh, wow, looks like it's west down below, even though it's east up here. And little things like that where if you are going over that spine because it's the best place to be, maybe you'll have a clue that one side or the other is better. And so looking at the other people's good. And knowing the site's really good too. Every site's different. every site is different. Each day at that site's different. So having a little bit of understanding before you even take off is important. And around here we got a lot of inverted days. So you can bounce off that ceiling for a good half hour before you figure out that's it. That's the top of the lift. Only to see something much higher, but that could be another layer. So launching the right spot around in this location is also a very handy thing, you know. I mean, it comes about all the time lately where should we go to the Skyport or should we go to EJ Bowl? So location, 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 just like in real estate. You know, this is an important thing when you've got later days and everyone below $3,000 is sinking out and everyone above it is climbing out, you know. And as far as technique, yeah, there's a lot of graphic illustrations that are in these books and others. Sailplane pilots were talking about this in the 50s, and so there's actually some lessons learned from those old schoolers about, you know, how to carve a 360, and the word carved comes in. It sort of reminds me of efficient skiing. You know, you're not slipping. You know, each segment of your turn is, you know, biting into the air, and you're not, you know, sliding or slipping or doing inefficient things. And having your gear together is good. I like oatmeal in the morning, you know, as opposed to bacon and eggs. And everyone's different, you know. You know, just having your physical sense is a good thing. And so that's it.
So I totally agree with both these guys. They've said a lot of really good things. I guess I'll start by saying that if you watch me fly in the mountains, it's really, really, really rare that I'm within 300 feet of the ground. Right? Even on our stable days, even on the days where I'm getting to Ojai under 2,000 feet, it's really, really rare that I'm within 300 feet of the ground. Or to Fillmore under 2,000 feet. So it's, I'm not sure it's necessary, I'm not sure it's worth it. You know, if we think about the amount of hot air that might be rising 50 feet from the ground versus the amount that might be rising 300 feet from the ground, there's a lot more at 300 feet. You have a lot more sources converging together and giving us bigger pockets of hot air rising and bigger columns of hot air rising. And in my mind, it usually works much better. There are the times where it's worth soaring, right? When we have a little bit of wind or anabatic flow coming up a face, that maybe you can hang out and wait till there's a sense of a thermal somewhere or get some altitude to get up to a different layer. But in general, like if your thought is, oh, I just need to dig it in deeper and be right next to the ground to get up, I think you're going to fail more than succeed, in my mind. And there's different theories on this. I see people on our mountains and all over the place make the mistake a lot of getting lower and lower and lower and lower in one place and not having the altitude to check other triggers, right? So it's a common thing at Skyport where people will get low enough at Skyport that they can't get to like where the power line towers are on the way to the thermal factory. And we all know that that's a really good place to bench up. And if your cycle's not on a Skyport, you want to just head over there and check that, you know, where the road cut is, you know, to the left, where the road cut is and where the power line towers are, because that's a great place to bench up to the thermal factory, and it often works super well. But if you scratch to 50, 100 feet below Skyport, you're just not getting there high enough to use that, right? In fact, you have to kind of like limp out to around the front side of the roundhouse, and you might not get another thermal for the whole flight, right? Or you might land St. Mary's. So I think hanging out at these triggers when you're in zeros, when you're not going down, is awesome. But if you're losing altitude, you are losing your searching power. So being in the same place, losing altitude, is saying, I don't want to use this altitude to find other thermals. I just want to lose altitude right here, right? You're using up your searching power. So I really recommend using your searching power. And there's plenty of days where like we can be under 2,000 feet all day, or we can be under 3,000 feet all day and have fantastic flights around here. But if you get low at Skyport first, or get low at EJ first, or go into La Cumbra and don't get a thermal and have to scratch out the canyon, you're never high enough to get over a trigger high enough to use it, right? So I think those things are important to think about. For me, the most important thing about thermaling is mental mapping, right? We're trying to create a mental map in our head of the shape and size of a thermal, and a thermal is a pulsating fluid in motion that might all of a sudden get sucked to a stronger thermal, right? It might get wide where the lapse rate is really good, and they get real narrow and tight where the lapse rate isn't as good, and they get wide again. A big strong one might suck other thermals in and rise pretty vertically, and a weak one without much power might get sucked to other ones. So it's a constantly changing thing. Our mental map should adjust constantly to it, and therefore our turns and the way we should fly it should adjust constantly. One pretty good rule, if you're not a super expert thermaler, and we have guys in the room who can break this rule all the time, right? And you'll see guys break this rule all the time. But one pretty good rule, one pretty good rule is you want to make pretty consistent 360s to get that mental map right? Cracker said it, if you're swinging all over the place, right? If your 360s are looking like this, right, and they're just all over the place, your mental map is shit, right? It's no good at all. You have to have some sort of consistent bank angle and consistent 360 to have a good mental map. Does that make sense? Right? And then the adjustments you make, and you ought to probably be making adjustments every 360, the adjustments you make should be fairly minor adjustments so that your mental map is still good. If you're making these major adjustments, oh, I'm in a steep bank and now I'm going straight for a little bit, and then I'm in a steep bank and going straight for a little bit, your mental map's horrible, right? You're feeling these really big pitch movements on the wind on your face, on your glider. Your vario's giving you vario sounds when you're actually not going up because of lift, you're just going up because of pitch, right? Because of angle of attack. And your mental map's shit, right? You're not doing consistent 360s. So consistent 360s really give us a good map, and then just little changes. Oh, there's more lift that side. I'm gonna just a little bit. And if you're doing just a little bit every single turn, you're mapping this thermal and figuring out where it is. I'll ask you guys to use your imagination a little bit now. Let's pretend there's a column of rising air this way, and I'm showing the drift, right? So the wind's coming from John, and it's going towards Mike, right? And we have plenty of light days in our mountains where the thermals are going pretty vertically, but we have a lot of days where there's an anabatic wind, a south wind, and it might have a little southeast tilt, might have a little southwest tilt, and it might not be consistent through the range, right? Each drainage might have its own little wind, and you ought to be ready for it to change every single time, because how the air is flowing up that drainage, where the biggest thermal is cracking off right there is drawing in the most air. There's all sorts of little things that are going to change the drift of this thermal, right? So for right now, we're pretending there's a thermal like this. So when I enter this thermal, right, I've got 3 rules to decide which way to turn, right? I want to make sure I'm in the thermal long enough, and you can see I'm entering the side of this thermal right now, right? Cool. This would be the downwind side entering. This would be the upwind side entering. You guys can imagine that there. Sweet. So there's 3 rules, right? If the terrain's near me, if there's a mountain here, what am I going to do? I'm going to turn away from the mountain, right? I don't want to mess with what happened to Cracker, which is piling into the side of the hill, right? I don't want to mess with that. Is that what we're doing? I wasn't there, but it sounds like that's what the story was. Okay, so first rule, right? Don't pile onto the side of the hill. Sometimes drift can be a lot more than you expect, right? So give yourself a wide margin. You want to be sure that even if you fall out of the thermal, you've got that 300 feet between you and the ground, right? That's a nice wide margin. That's good. Second rule is maybe I feel an obvious lift inside of my glider, right? So if I feel an obvious lift inside of my glider, then when I know the thermal's big enough, which is typically 3, 4, 5 seconds, whatever, I'm going to turn that way, right? Because I'm feeling, oh, okay, there's more and more lift on that side of my glider, I'm going to turn that way. Makes sense, right? If it feels pretty symmetric, I'm going to turn into the wind, right? Let me explain that for a second. If the wind's coming into a thermal, what we have on the upwind side of the thermal is a really clear boundary of not lift and lift. Very easy for a mental mapping, right? There's not lift there, there's lift there. Every time we go in and out of that line, it's really, really clear. And it's sloped like that, it's sloped like Lower Parma, right? Lower Parma is easy to get. Why? Go ahead. It's sloping uphill, right? So it interacts with our glide ratio that's easy to interact with, right? The other side of this, trying to get the downwind side of a thermal, much hard. It's like trying to land on a down sloped LZ. It's hard, right? It's hard to get that LZ because you just keep flying over it. In this case, you just keep flying down past it, right? So the upwind side of a thermal, very easy to mentally map, right? The downwind side of a thermal, guess what? We have shards of lift coming off. I call them sucker bubbles. These little bubbles that might be lifting. You might get a half turn, maybe even a full turn in them. Then you come back around and there's no lift there anymore, right? Those are little sucker bubbles that are sharding off of this thermal, right? Because they just break off in the wind. You probably have sink there. In a lot of wind, it starts to act like an object in the wind and give you like some lee side action, right? Some turbulence there, right? So this side is really messy. The downwind side of the thermal is super messy. The upwind side, very easy to mentally map and very easy to come back in if we fall out of. So if you're experimenting with like, hey, let's extend a turnout, this side is like, hey, if you mess up, if you're wrong about extending your turnout, this is the good side to do it in. Also, guess what? The more vertically rising air is going to stand up taller in the wind, the air with better lift rates, right? And it's probably going to trend towards the upwind side. Does that make sense? So anytime, you know, we can trend towards the upwind side of the thermal, awesome. Right? If you've done a few turns and your climb rate's not as good as it was a couple turns ago, extend. And remember, I started with saying just a touch. If we extend out a whole ton, we ruin our mental mapping, right? So extend out just a touch to the upwind side and then go right back into your turn. Just a touch to the upwind side, go right back into your turn. In strong wind, I extend out every single turn to the upwind side. John, do you do that in strong wind?
Yeah, I try to work the upwind side.
Yeah.
The way I look at it is that if it's a really strong thermal, it's almost like a stationary item, like a mountain or something. And when the wind's hitting it, it's sort of like ridge lift on the front side of it. And so it'll actually be a stronger section of lift than on the downwind side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, over here, and usually the downwind side is where blocks are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we talked about that, right? We don't want to be interacting with the mountain. Yeah. And it's not that, like, sometimes we don't get a thermal, let's say, at the spine connecting the R&R to the tip, and we can't, like, bench back to the R&R. Sometimes that works great, right? You get altitude and you bench back. Or, let's say, from the thermal factory or from the antenna farm to the thermal factory. Benching back works great. But while we're exploring thermals, we want to keep that mental mapping good. We want to be really consistent with our turns, right? And if we're experimenting at all, the upwind side is usually the better side to fall out of. So the upwind side is good to fall out of. I'd like to talk a little bit about efficiency on gliders. There's this old school thing in paragliding, it's still in a lot of the books and stuff, that, oh, I'm in a thermal, I should slow down my glider, right? What are we doing to the glider when we slow down the glider? We're talking with brakes now. Yeah.
Increasing drag.
Increasing drag, yeah, exactly. We're pulling the back of the glider down. In a hang glider, it works a little bit differently, right? Because it's not as malleable, but it's also increasing drag, right? So here we go. We're pulling the back of the glider down. You guys are the air seeing that glider. So if we're trying to do a turn and the thermal gets turbulent, and are our thermals here turbulent sometimes? Yeah, often, like, we got to work them. There are these little bullets that are turbulent. The thermal gets turbulent. The thermal has a lot more surface area it's seeing, right? The less brake we have on, the more our glider's going to cut through that turbulence like a knife, right? It also turns out the reason we have some brake on, right, is to get the turn happening, right? Obviously, we have a lot of weight shift to get the turn happening before we add any brake. This is a right turn I'm demonstrating, right? We have a lot of weight shift that can happen before we have to start to put all this drag into the equation and let the turbulence throw us around more, right? And possibly throw us out of the thermal more. And as we're adding brake, so we want to have really good communication of our glider, right? We want to feel these subtle differences. I'd like to feel if my outside wingtip goes out of the thermal, right? Makes sense, right? And I can feel that if the outside pressure in the right turn, if the left side starts to feel me no pressure, I'd like to feel that. And then on my next turn, I'll try to cut that side off just a touch earlier and extend the other side just a touch more. So I'd like to feel these communications. But if I start to have too much brake on, it's just going to be throwing me around, and I start to use too much muscles, right? Too big of muscles to have that finite control, that nice small communication of the glider, feel those subtle differences, and I'm taking away communication. Does that make sense? So we really want that light touch, just enough to feel the glider, and guess what? We have to be relaxed to feel it, right? It kind of means relaxed shoulders, relaxed arms, our hands just kind of hanging out. If the pressure goes away, our hands should automatically come down here, right? We don't want to be going like this and going like this and going like this, because guess what? We're going to feel more and more and more and more turbulence. We're going to get scareder and scareder and scareder, and it's not going to help us thermal at all, right? So we really want to try to be light. We really want to try to be calm. We want to have just a little bit of brake pressure. That's all I wanted to say.
You talked a little bit about, because it'll kind of be a good segue from talking about efficiency and thermaling and all that into thermal etiquette.
Yeah, awesome. So, guys, in general, with everyone in this room, I think everyone has great thermal etiquette. Good job. I think a lot of people in this room are a little shy and a little hesitant to fly close to other people, right? Here's the thing. If Tom and I are thermaling, and let's say we're at the R&R, but we're a distance away from each other, right? If we're both thermaling and going up at the same climb rate, we will climb better if we join forces, right? Because all of a sudden, if I have someone else right here and I'm thermaling with them, right, and I see them start to rise faster on one side of the turn, I can see that, so I can extend my turn that way, and together we'll map it much better than one person will, right? So my rule is, if there's someone near me within reach, and I even have an inkling, and I'm okay with my inkling being wrong, if I have an inkling that they're climbing faster than me, I should get to them. And if I'm right near you, and I'm climbing faster than you, and you don't come to me, I'm thinking, oh, he's a fucking idiot. Sorry. Yeah, come work with me, asshole. I'm climbing faster than you. Let's do this together, right? I don't call you guys assholes. But, like, we need to work together to do this right? If we're all taking our own individual thermals away from each other, right, we are much less efficient. The cool thing about the hoedown, the cool thing about the task, the cool thing about lots of us being in the mountains every day is that we can fly together and map out the sky together. So if you're like, no, this is my thermal, I want to say to this thermal, I don't care what's going on over there, I'm like this, right? Then sorry, you're being inefficient, right? You're not climbing as well as you could climb. Come fly with other people, join other climbs with people, and map it out together. It's huge.
How do you manage, like, sometimes I feel like I'm adjusting my turn to avoid the person and then calling out in the lift that I thought I was in.
So, in general, right, if someone's marking a climb, they are awesome to you, right? We want to be very respectful to them. So if they're going around in a circle, we want to come in to adjust their circle as low as possible. Right? So about the same turn radius, right? And everything like that. Because if we're doing this sort of thing, then both of us get screwed up, right? So we want to come in to adjust their turn as low as possible. And then if we find a liftier part of the air, they ought to see us, and the whole circle ought to change that direction, right? If they don't see us, right, and you found a liftier piece of air, and they're going up slower over there, or they're going down like that, cut inside. Cut inside. I mean, not so much that you risk a mid-air collision, but in general, I'd say, and maybe some of us who have flown in big crowds a lot, like everyone here is very, very, very polite, right? Like giving each other tons and tons and tons of room to our detriment a little bit, right? Let's get a little closer, right? And if we're all thermaling and someone goes and experiments with another area and finds it and cuts us on the inside a little bit, big deal, right? No big deal. It's not a big, it's no problem, right? And if you ever find yourself like getting pissed off in the air because someone's thermaling aggressively or too tight, like stop being pissed off and just laugh about it, right? It's all good. And if they're out climbing you, they're doing it right, you know?
And also, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and leave that thermal if you're thinking that way, and then come back and hop in under.
There you go.
And go right back up to where they are too.
Yeah.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
pull out to get a little.
There's these cool things. I've been talking a lot with Donizete Lermouse, who is one of the guys. He set the world record twice, the paragliding world record twice in Brazil with this Brazilian team of 4 or 5 guys. And I've been flying with him some and talking with him a lot about it. And it's pretty cool because when we're team flying, he's like, Mitch, if you're the lower guy and you don't have a thermal, you need to push super hard and find the boomer to catch up, right? And if you're the higher guy, right, to wait for the lower guy, what you ought to do is not core the best thermal you can. You ought to do these really big search patterns, right? Because you won't descend much because you're not putting much bank angle in your glider, right? These really big search patterns to find the best climb you can and let him climb up to you, and then you've mapped out the whole area for both of you, right? So like, and in competitions, we're doing the same thing. We're working as a team for most of the time. In the last 10% of the race, it kind of changes a little bit. But for most of the time, we're working as a team. And someone who goes out and kind of experiments with this little nudge we all felt in the thermal, like we'll let them right back into the thermal. We'll make room for them. You'll even take a little inefficiency to say, hey, come on back in, dude. Thanks for trying that, right? So I think we can all get better at that. And if you are going up faster, then that other person should have adjusted to your turn. If I can expand on that touch, guys, like eye contact and hand signals, and even when we're close enough to talk and say like, hey, come on in, you know, I'm making room for you, or to give them the wave in, like, yeah, come on in, I'm extending out, right? We need to be using our head and our body and stuff like the turn signals in a car, right? It's a really good point. And right, if there's other people around you in the air, be looking at them and figuring out what they're doing and making eye contact and doing hand gestures, waving them in, or saying, oh, sorry, dude, you know, like, sorry, I know I cut that a little tight. Sorry, I'm turning the wrong way. I'll switch back to the same direction, stuff like that. Yeah, and that goes a long way. And I find that the pilots I fly with, and some of the most uncomfortable pilots I fly with are the ones that dabble in the turn, right? They kind of like are somewhat into it, and then they're somewhat out of it, and they're kind of like, am I too close to this other pilot? And then they fly straight for a while, and then they want to come back into the thermal, so they do a big turn and come back into the middle of it, and then like, oh, am I too close again? And they leave again, and you're constantly having to make all this room for them in the thermal and adjust your own turn, and it screws with the mental mapping. So, I mean, it's more repetition, more flying with other pilots, which we're doing in the hoedown, and we're doing together a lot, helps that, but it's kind of like having the confidence of being in that turn radius and knowing like, I'm in this turn radius with this person, they're okay with me being there, I'm okay being here, and it's all good, right? And like typically I'll hoot and holler when I'm with someone in a thermal, right? To try to get the energy level high and try to like enjoy the experience. And it's pretty cool when we're working together, and if we have 10 pilots in a thermal and we're mapping it out together, we just climb so much better. And it's more fun for me than flying alone. 2 thermals are going to come together often, or 3 thermals are going to come together often, right? So you're going to have 2 groups that are in a legitimate turn direction, that are different turn directions, and the thermals merge, and that's going to happen pretty often in flying. And guess what? Half of us just need to start turning the other way. And yeah, if there's a low pilot coming up to a higher pilot, right? The lower pilot has the right of way, and the higher should switch. But if we're just, if 2 thermals are merging and one thermal is turning left and one thermal is turning right, half of you are just going to have to feel good about turning the other way. And what you shouldn't do is, this is my thermal, I'm turning right. What the hell are you doing? No, come on, just be friends, turn the other way.
Thanks, Mitch.